Welcome back to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grausbull, and joining me today is Jennifer Douglas. And Jennifer is a breast cancer survivor, author, and nationally recognized patient advocate based in Southern California. Diagnosed with ductal carcinoma in situ, or DCIS, at 41, she quickly learned that stage 0 doesn't mean zero challenges. After completing treatment, she felt called to encourage others through her writing and online advocacy. Her book, A Breast Cancer Journey, Living It One Step at a Time, was a #1 new release in breast cancer on Amazon and was named one of Indie Reader's best reviewed books of June 2023. Jennifer is also the creator of Encourage, Breast Cancer and Beyond, an online course that brings her book to life with support calls and a private community that guides women through treatment and recovery. Through her blog and digital platforms, she shares trusted education, practical tools, and encouragement to help patients feel informed, supported, and empowered in their care decisions. In addition to her work supporting patients, she also partners with medtech companies such as Prelude DX, Perimeter, and Calum?
Yep.
Diagnostic Solutions by sharing her patient voice and perspective. So welcome to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. I'm delighted to be here.
I am so excited to have this conversation because October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I go back and forth between breast cancer awareness, breast health awareness, and why is it only 1 month? We should be aware of all cancers and breast cancer all year long and back and forth. But I'm very excited to have you on to share about DCIS because I have not talked about that yet on the show. So this is going to be such a fun conversation.
Well, thanks for having me. And I didn't even know DCIS existed. So that was an interesting learning point for me.
You know, I learned about it. So I am a certified cancer exercise specialist. So I went through specialized training to be able to work with cancer patients. And that was when I first heard about it. And I had heard all the things like, oh, well, 20 years ago, it wasn't even cancer. And, oh, it's stage 0. And why do people go through all the things with it when it's not really that big of a deal? And it really is. So I'm excited that we get to talk about this today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I hear all that messaging all the time of, is it cancer? Is it pre-cancer? And then, there are patients, we have to go through many of the same treatments that patients at higher stages need to go through as well.
Yes. And I love that you wrote a book about it because it needs to be talked about. And people, I'm sure I've heard those things, you've heard those things. So other people dealing with DCIS are probably hearing these things and wondering, where do I fit into this whole thing? So this is going to be a great conversation.
Well, thanks. I didn't expect to write a book, so that was cool that it happened.
I've interviewed several people who have written books, and I don't know if anybody has said that they set out to write a book when they started this whole experience. It just kind of evolved into that over time. So, all right. So take us back to what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed. Were you experiencing symptoms? Was it just a random thing? Like, take us back to your diagnosis time.
Sure. So I am the textbook of go in and get your mammograms every year. I went in at 40. Because my primary care doctor referred me. And, I had been in for breast imaging before because I have lumps in my breast that are benign. And so I had ultrasounds before. And so as I was meeting with my primary care doctor, she said, you're 40, it's time to go in. So I went in, got my mammogram, and I was expecting something to happen that first mammogram, and it was clear. I was like, okay.
Why were you expecting something to happen?
Because I'd had fibroadenomas. I'd had a couple of biopsies before. So I was expecting them to call me back, and they didn't. I was like, okay. So before I left, I made my appointment for the following year, which is a hack I definitely suggest you do. Otherwise we forget.
Right.
but I went back in 2019, and it was summertime, which was a good time for me to do my screenings because I was homeschooling my boys at the time, and they were just entering high school. So I went in, and I wasn't expecting anything. I was like, okay, got through the first one, let's get through the second one. And my phone rang probably the next day. I could look at my calendar, but it was pretty close to the next day, and they're like, we need you to come back in for another mammogram. And I was like, oh. I was like, well, okay, if you're going to call me in for another mammogram, I want you to order an ultrasound as well, because I had been through breast screening before, and the last thing I wanted was to go in for a mammogram and then to have them need to order another ultrasound. So they did all that, and they called me back, my primary care, and she goes, you need to go see a breast surgeon. And yeah, like really, within the week. So she referred me to a surgeon, and I was familiar with this surgeon, but I was not excited about going back to him because he had ordered my biopsies previously, and I'd had to leave my hometown to go to get the biopsies, and I wasn't feeling it. So I asked her, I said, do you have anyone else locally that you would recommend? And so she recommended another medical group, but I followed up, went to the surgeon. He was like, I had all these questions. Like I went to I had my questions ready because I didn't understand the radiology report. And so I had all my questions, and the appointment was really short. He's like, I don't really think it's anything. I want you to go in and get a biopsy. And then like his nurse came in, he's like, I got to go. I have an emergency. And he left.
Oh, yes. Lovely, lovely surgeon.
And I was like, I just looked at my husband and I was like, okay. And they wanted to get me scheduled for the biopsy. So props to them for like wanting to get me scheduled right away. There was definitely an urgency, but I also wanted my questions answered. So I hit pause, called the other medical group, and ended up getting an appointment after my vacation. I didn't want to get a biopsy because we were going to the Caribbean, and I didn't want to. I'm like, I did not want to get a call that they found something while I was on vacation in the Caribbean, and I also wanted to swim. Right. So I was like, we're going to hit pause for a moment. And so I went into a different medical group, and the funniest part for me was I had inadvertently made an appointment with an oncologist, which was not the right doctor to make an appointment with, but he was gracious.
This medical group?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was gracious enough to meet with me. He's like, Jennifer, I looked through all your stuff. I noticed some things on your blood work, so I'd like you to follow up on this. But also you need to see my colleague. He's a breast surgeon. I was like, oh, okay. It was not a wasted appointment. Like he was super patient. And I was like, I was really feeling like this could be, if I need to keep seeing this group, this was a good one to see. And so his breast surgeon was actually doing paperwork and was able to come in and look over my chart, awesome. Like right there. Yeah. And so he met me. He immediately went to his computer and looked and read through everything. He's like, okay, Jennifer, here's what I want. I want us to redo all the imaging. I was like, okay. He's like, yeah, I want you to go to the UCLA Health Center right here. I want you to go get your imaging done there. I'm like, okay. So I got the imaging done, and he goes, also schedule an appointment with me. We'll talk about the imaging. And this is the way he operated. Like he always wanted to talk to me about the imaging. Right. And so once we talked about the imaging, he was like, I need you to go get a biopsy, but I need you to get 2 biopsies because there are 2 things that are happening right in the same place, and I need to know what's going on. So I scheduled my biopsies, and I needed to have a mammogram guided biopsy, also called a stereotactic guided biopsy, and then an ultrasound guided biopsy. And those biopsies were ultimately the ones that discovered my DCIS. And so I about a week and a half later, after my biopsies, I had an appointment with him, and that was one of the things I really liked was he always delivered my results either in person or over the phone. That was, and he was also really good about explaining what exactly was going on. And so he told me it was DCIS and it was 4 millimeters and that very treatable, but he did recommend that I do genetic testing and get an MRI because I was 41. Actually, it was it was the day before my 42nd birthday, so that was not a great birthday present.
Happy birthday! You have cancer.
Yeah, that was essentially what happened. So I had already done a little bit of research because I kind of had a feeling that this was going to be something that we needed to address. And he highly recommended a lumpectomy plus radiation. And so I was like, okay, if my MRI comes back clear, my genetics come back clear, can we just get something on the calendar? Because my mom was coming in for a visit and she was going to be with us for a month. She'd already planned the visit. She lives in Hawaii. And I was like, wouldn't it be great if I needed surgery for her to be here to kind of help manage the household?
Sure.
So we got a date on the calendar. I got my MRI done. I got my genetic testing done. I lit up my MRI like a Christmas tree, which is not what you want. Like it was exciting and busy. And my surgeon was
exciting, yes.
Yeah. My surgeon was like, you need 3 more biopsies
on
your opposite breast and one of them in a lymph node.
Wow.
And I was like, oh crap. There were probably some other words.
In a lymph node, it was still diagnosed as stage 0?
So the lymph node, they did 3 biopsies on my opposite breast, and the lymph node biopsy was benign.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So they biopsied the lymph node and they biopsied 2 other areas, and they were all benign. And the same day I was going down for my last, I had to do 3 biopsies. It was like Monday, biopsy, Tuesday, recovery day, Wednesday, biopsy.
Woohoo!
I had to shower, like, you know how they have to have you shower, like you have to wait 24 hours? It's very strategic showering that week. I have determined that I definitely hate biopsies, but if I had to pick one, I'll pick the ultrasound guided biopsy over the MRI or the mammogram guided biopsy any day. So
I gotta say, I think, and maybe because during surgery, you're asleep, but for me, like the biopsy and recovering from the biopsy was worse and more painful than the actual lumpectomy. And I don't really know why, but it was, biopsies are not fun. And no, you had to do, 5 of them total, right?
5 total. And only one of them in both breasts. And only one of them was cancer. And the first biopsy, I passed out in the middle of it because I was asking too many questions. I was very curious. I was like, so tell me about what we're doing. And I'm sitting up and they've got my breast in the compression. And she's like, so what we're doing is we're trying to find these calcifications. And we've got this machine that's going to do this. And I'm going to numb you. And the next thing I knew, I was like passed out with some orange juice. They were like holding me up and giving me orange juice. And I was like crying. Oh. And I was like, did you get the sample? They're like, we did. Are you okay? And I'm like, I don't know. More orange juice. But yeah,
so what, do biopsies, you need to eat or do you need to not eat before having these done to prevent that from happening? Or
so I actually have learned there's 2 ways to do these MRI guided biopsies. One of them is sitting up and one of them is laying down with your breasts hanging through a table. My office didn't have that option, but I have heard and read that the risk of passing out is higher when you're sitting up with these biopsies. And so I have since just tell my providers that sometimes this might happen. So I let them be prepared. And I haven't since. I've stopped asking so many questions during the procedure because that wasn't a great plan for me.
Well, I will say I never had an MRI sitting up, but the laying down MRI was not comfortable at all, and I had a bad reaction to the contrast that they give you. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it was bad enough that I just had a long talk with my oncologist, and so now I get to have the whole breast ultrasound instead of the MRI in addition to my mammogram. And that is just, I'm actually going to have it done this week, I believe.
Okay.
And
Okay.
yeah, you just lay down and they stick this thing on you and a little mobile ultrasound
Huh.
thing. And, and you're in and out and it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, the MRI I was laying down, it was the mammogram one that it was like they had me sitting up. It was this whole like contraption. It was just but yeah, I have targeted ultrasounds, but I've never had that whole breast ultrasound.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I had it done last year and it was quite pleasant compared to the MRI and the
Oh, yeah.
mammogram. Like, cause my tumor was right up against my chest wall. And
Okay.
it was very fortuitous that the tech found it originally, that she pulled my breast forward enough that she could see it. But now when I go in for my mammograms, they probably do 10, 12 images because it's so hard, especially like the sideways or the
Yes.
sideways ones to actually
Mm-hmm.
get it out far enough to
Yep.
see it. So I'm just radiating like crazy every time I go in for a mammogram. Like, woohoo! Well, we need to do this again. Yes, I'm sure that you do. But whole breast ultrasounds are also very popular for people who have very dense breasts, and
Mm-hmm.
mammograms might miss things. And
Yep.
so it's becoming more and more popular. I don't know if it's in addition to a mammogram or instead of a mammogram for women who have very dense breasts, which I do as well.
Yep.
So,
Yep. I do too.
all right. So, and then you said you did have to have radiation
I
after
did.
the lumpectomy, correct? And we're all NED now, and all is good.
Yes, so it's been, I finished treatment right before Christmas in 2019, and I have been clear since then. I was on tamoxifen for a little while. That was hard, and I ultimately stopped. But yeah, radiation was hard. I was not expecting it to be as hard as it was. I'm glad I did it. I would also ensure that I really needed it the next, if I had another recurrence, if I had something in my opposite breast, I would ask some questions about radiation because it was really hard on me. I was very fatigued, very burned, and it just extended my recovery. Going in every day, I had 20 treatments, so it was 4 weeks of treatment. It was a lot.
Wow. And people go back and forth. Some people would say they would rather, having gone through it, they would rather the chemo versus the radiation. Other people say they would rather the radiation versus the chemo if you don't have to have both. I had radiation, but I only had 5 treatments. So it was not that big of a deal. And I never had chemo. So I won't say it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it's always a big deal, but I didn't really have any side effects or anything from my radiation. But I have heard stories and it is not fun at all.
No, I'm glad I did it, but it was hard. And so but yeah, in 2022, they found something on my opposite breast that they were concerned about. And they took a biopsy, and the biopsy was inconclusive, which I didn't know they could have inconclusive biopsies.
Okay.
So my surgeon called me and said, we're going to need to take it out. So I needed to have another lumpectomy. But he got me in really quickly. I recovered really smoothly from that one as well. Both my surgeries just were so much easier than the whole diagnosis process. And my recovery, it was really interesting. After my second lumpectomy in 2022, by about 2 weeks later, I was good. I was fully recovered, and I can't even really see that scar, so that's kind of interesting.
And was that one benign? Did it turn out to be benign?
Yes, I missed that point. Yes, it was benign. Yes, it was. It was. So that was, but they had, what they had found were spindle cells, and spindle cells can be an indicator of something a lot more serious. And so they weren't comfortable with just a little sample that they got. Apparently they sent it before the UCLA tumor board, and they were like, no, we need to take this out. As I'm sure that, coupled with my history of breast cancer, they're like, we're not gonna
Not
just
messing
leave
around
this in.
here.
No. But it was a fibroadenoma, and I have several of those, but that one in particular had grown, and so that was what triggered the biopsy. because the size changed from the previous year, and the biopsy being inconclusive, they just said, no, we're going to pull it. And I'm glad they did. But it was an interesting point in time. The day I found out I needed another surgery was the day I signed my book deal.
Oh my gosh.
So it was the best of times. It was the worst of times, to quote Tale of Two Cities. That was my English teacher's favorite book. But yeah, that was a very weird day, was to sign the book deal in the morning and get the information from my surgeon that afternoon I needed more surgery.
Oh my gosh. Well, it sounds like you, and I'm always a big advocate of getting a second opinion or a third opinion. And if you are not comfortable with what your doctors have to say or how your doctors treat you, there are many other people out there. And it sounds like you switching doctors was a very good choice on your part.
It really was. I really have a lot of trust in my team. And, going into that second surgery, I was far less anxious because it was the same surgeon. And, I trusted that he was going to make the right decisions. And that helped. That really lowered my anxiety a lot. I mean, it was still hard.
Sure. Yeah. But it is so important that you trust your team and have a good relationship, because there's so much anxiety around so many other things that you don't want to have that anxiety over the people who are taking care of you.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So tell me about what, you said that you didn't set out to be a writer and publish a book. So how did that whole process come about, and what made you decide that, hey, this is a story that I want out there for the world?
So I love to read. Anytime I'm facing another challenge in my life, I go out, I either go to the library or, read about 4 or 5 books on the topic. So when I was diagnosed, that was exactly what I did. I started reading through a bunch of books, a bunch of memoirs, and I loved the memoirs that were talking about the personal aspect of breast cancer, what it was really like, what it felt like, what it was like for these women to go through them. But invariably, almost all the ones I read, they would be talking about chemo. And I didn't need chemo. And so it was kind of like, okay, I was having a hard time, but they were having a harder time. And I was like, am I doing this wrong? And so I got to the end of my treatment, and I had a lot to process. And my family, everyone, we were all kind of ready to just be back to life. But I needed to work through what I'd been through, a lot of the emotions, a lot of the mental stuff, a lot of the anxiety. And so I just decided one day to just start a document and just start writing my story from beginning to end. And every day I did a little bit, and I would write before my boys got up and before we started school, and I'd get to the end of my typing energy and close it up. And I got to the end of my story, and I'd written 72,000 words, and I was like, how long is a book? I went online. I was like, oh, I wrote a book. Now what? So I was like, all right, I should probably edit it. So I read through it, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of mistakes in there, but that's okay. And then I was like, I have no idea how to go about this. And I have no online platform. I was not on social media at all. And so it was, 1, I knew I couldn't sell a book without a platform. And 2, I had no idea how to get it from a raw document to an actual published book. So I kind of approached it 2 ways. One was I reached out and found some editors on a platform called Readsy. I found a couple of editors, and one of the editors I really liked, she basically wrote back and she goes, I love what you did. She goes, but it's really unstructured. Would you be open to me coaching you on how to actually write a structured book? And here's my proposal. And I was like, sure. So basically I rewrote the entire book.
Well, you have to know. I mean, you had all the thoughts there. You just
I had the thoughts.
them.
But every single, like, it is, I did actually, like, I didn't even, we went through a whole, like, outlining process and everything. And so I did rewrite the entire thing. And I had a deadline because she was like, you got to get it to me by here. Otherwise, I can't, I'll review what you have, but this is the last day I can take it. So that was good motivation. I got through it. And by that time, I was like, okay, I realized she actually told me you need a second editor. I'm like, what? I thought you were my editor. She goes, no, you need a copy editor. And I'm like, oh. She goes, I think I'm a content editor or, something like that. And I was like, oh, great. She goes, but I don't do that. I'm like, okay. So, I went out and found another editor, and that editor was the one who suggested I start sending my book out and query publishing houses that were called hybrid publishing, that they were not self-publishing, but they're also not, I didn't have an agent. There was no way I was going to get into one of the big publishing companies. And so this offered a more curated publishing experience that would take care of a lot of the publishing, the book cover, the page layout, all the things I didn't want to learn, and also take care of the distribution. And so I found my publishing house. They're called Bold Story Press, and they're fabulous. They publish books by women authors, and so it was a fantastic experience to work with them. But in the meantime, I decided I needed to get online, and so I started writing a blog. And this was 2020. And so when I started my blog, everything was shut down and everyone was homeschooling. So I kind of did this hybrid of, like, I was writing about breast cancer, but I was also teaching everything I knew about virtual schooling, because everyone on the planet was virtual schooling and I had been doing it for years. So I have a lot of resources on my blog for that as well. Even though right now I'm mostly focused on talking about breast cancer. So I learned, and I had to learn how to do social media. I had like a dead Facebook account, and I was like, okay, so let's try Facebook. And then my first thing on Instagram was like, what is this thing, and why can't I post links? And so, so I had to learn a lot.
I know. I still, when I post the podcast on Instagram, I just have, subscribe and download wherever you get your podcast, because putting links there makes no difference at all. And then when I go to Facebook and LinkedIn, I can put the actual links in there that are clickable. Yes, it's drives me crazy. But this is really good information, because there are people out there that think, okay, I just write down my thoughts. Hey, I have 72,000 words. Here's a book, and it's out. That there is a lot to actually writing and getting your story in a book out there for the world. So I love that you share the nitty gritty and the not so glamorous stuff about getting a book from idea to press. So that's awesome.
It was a process. I loved going through it. I will likely do it again. But because I've really enjoyed the process, and I like the fact that it's done. But then I just recently, over the summer, recorded all of the content in my book into an online class, because I realized some people aren't readers. They don't want to look through a book. That's the way I love to do it, but not everybody wants to do that. So so that was my summer project, and I'm excited with what's out there now. It's got 14 modules, and the videos are short. They're accessible, and I'm not reading the book. I'm just talking about what's in the book and offering, my perspectives. And some of the cool thing about the online course is I can add and edit as, things change. Like I can talk about shorter radiation treatments or baby tamoxifen or things like that. And then I can also help people with support calls as well.
Now, what is kind of your book is called A Breast Cancer Journey. So obviously, we know what it's about, but kind of what is the overarching theme or purpose of your book for your readers?
So what I really wanted to do was educate. So bring that information that I had researched into a digestible form, but also really to support our overall well-being, so physical, mental, and emotional. my medical team was great for supporting me physically and making sure got the treatment I needed. But there was a lot of a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, a lot of sleep disruption, a lot of routine shifting that needed to happen. There was so much more to breast cancer and the disruption it brought to our family. So what I wanted to do was have every chapter, starts with my experience, gives insight into what you might need during that time. Like if you're going through biopsies, what are they like? What might you need? What does recovery look like? But then at the end, there are sections dedicated to emotional and mental well-being. What are the worries? What are the feelings you might be having? What are some things that helped me? And so that really, I wanted to encompass the whole woman going through breast cancer, not just give out a lot of medical information. I'm not a doctor, and so I needed to walk the line of here's what I found out, but also, go check with your doctor. And so, and there isn't in my book, there is not a chapter dedicated to chemotherapy, and I did that intentionally. I talk about chemo. I talk about when, some of the tests that you might need to determine if you need chemo. I have quotes in my book from women who've gone through chemo. I don't have a dedicated chapter on it because I didn't personally experience it, and I wanted a book out there that addressed the early stage breast cancer survivors like myself who maybe don't need chemo as a part of their journey, but want to hear from someone who has gotten through it, but also recognizes it can be hard.
Now, do you talk about, because kind of like I mentioned in the beginning, there are people out there that feel that DCIS isn't really cancer or it's baby cancer or whatever, I would assume, but do you address those thoughts in your book?
I do. I talk about, some of my own personal reactions of when I felt like my experience wasn't being validated or dismissed. And that's ultimately, that's the whole point of why I wrote it. Actually, the original title of the book had DCIS in it, but my publishing team decided to broaden it to include breast cancer. And so I do talk a lot about it. And what I've heard from readers is that I actually have been able to put into words what they've been feeling. Nice. And that they feel heard, they feel understood, they feel like their experience matters. And, that's why I do what I do, because, it's so hard. And sometimes we don't have someone in our life who's been through this particular stage of cancer. And, for someone to say, yeah, it's okay to be scared about going in for a biopsy and, or trying to make a decision of, do I remove part of my breast or all of it? Because at this point, we're still removing the DCIS via surgery. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And, I go back and forth also about the whole staging jargon. I have a friend who had DCIS, and she had a lumpectomy. She had chemo. Like, I don't really know the specifics as to why one does or one doesn't. And she was considered stage 0. And then a couple of years later, we had a mutual friend who was diagnosed with colon cancer, and her colon cancer was stage 2, and she had surgery, and that was it.
Huh.
And that was all that she needed. They took out a piece of her colon. They got it, everything was fine after that. And we had several conversations about, well, why doesn't she have chemo when I had to have chemo at stage 0? And, we think about the stages as, well, each one is worse, but treatment, depending on what kind of cancer you have, treatment is different regardless of, what the stage is. So it's very interesting. I don't like stage 0. I mean, I get from a medical terminology why they call it that, but it doesn't negate the need for treatment and getting it gone.
And that's exactly right. And they, for some cancers like prostate cancer, observation active surveillance is a treatment option.
Mm-hmm.
And there are studies right now to see if there are some types of DCIS that could be safely observed, whether maybe the patient is older, maybe it's low grade, maybe it has certain expressions of different genes that make it less aggressive. But at this point, we're still, the standard of care is surgical removal, maybe radiation, and a lot of times, if you've got hormone receptor, you're gonna be recommended to be on something like tamoxifen. And I think I'd love to see continued research to de-escalate treatment with data. And that to me is where show me the data. If you can show me the data that shows that my DCIS is never going to bother me, it's never going to move, then great. Otherwise, take it out. Get it out.
Now, for those who don't know a lot about DCIS, is DCIS, is it its own thing that it can progress to stage 1, stage 2 DCIS, or does DCIS, if left untreated and it grows, becomes invasive cancer, what I have or what, other people have? What's the kind of progression of DCIS?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So DCIS stands for ductal carcinoma. So those two letters are the important ones to remember. And then in situ means in place. So when they discover DCIS, it is inside the ducts of our breast. It has not spread or invaded. Now, DCIS remains stage 0. It could be really tiny, like mine at 4 millimeters. It can be multiple centimeters. It can be all over your breast. It's still stage 0 if it hasn't spread out of the ducts, which is interesting. When it spreads out of the duct, it becomes invasive ductal carcinoma, IDC. So DCIS, pure DCIS, is never going to be staged at stage 3 or stage 2. It will be invasive ductal carcinoma at that point.
Which is where we get into the stage 1, 2, 3. Mine was stage 1, but it was IDC, invasive ductal carcinoma. Okay. So there is a possibility that DCIS could never leave the ducts and you could live with it for the rest of your life without any issues. Yeah.
And realistically, we didn't discover DCIS until we started doing widespread mammography. You can actually map the trajectory of DCIS diagnoses with the number of mammogram machines in the United States. And so originally they thought all DCIS would progress to invasive cancer. And it turns out there are different flavors. Some of them are just, low grade. They're never going to do anything. And some of them actually can invade and be a real problem.
Which is why I've heard the people say that 20 years ago, DCIS wasn't even cancer, more so because it just wasn't found.
Right.
Not that it wasn't cancer, we didn't have the technology to be able to find it.
Right.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. All right, so Jennifer, where can people find you? If they want your book, and we'll put it all in the show notes, but in case people are just listening, where can people find you? Where can people get access to your book and your online course, and if they just want to connect with you?
Sure. So my book is available online wherever you like to get your books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple Books, so you can search for it on there. My course is available on my website. I have 2 websites. My author website is jenniferadouglas.com. It's got my blog. It's got links to my course. It's got all things about my book. And then my Pearls of Encouragement site is, it's a Kajabi site, and it hosts, it has my course, and you can take a look at that. And so that's there. And then online, my handles across the platforms I have is Madame Jen Douglas, MME Jen Douglas.
I like
love
that.
all things French. And so that was what I chose. So I share regularly on Instagram, on X, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook.
Awesome. Good. I'm gonna check that out and get your book because I don't know a ton about DCS and I want to definitely learn more about it. All right. So I asked this of all of my guests, last question that I ask. So if you were to come across someone who is just diagnosed with cancer or somebody reached out to you, they're in the midst of overwhelm about a cancer diagnosis, what is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody to kind of help them through these early stages and to help calm some of the overwhelm of a cancer diagnosis?
That's a great question. And the biggest thing I would say was take a breath. A lot of times we get a lot of information and then we need to process it, and that's where that overwhelm comes in. And then we need to make a decision. But once we make whatever decision we need to make, if we can just pause, go for a walk, take a breath, do some deep breathing, and really come to understand why you're making that decision, then you can communicate out either to your team or to other people what your decision is. But to me, taking that pause of you're going to make the information, you're going to take all the questions in, go through that process, but that pause is what can help us move from that decision-making phase into, okay, this is the treatment, let's get prepared for it.
I love that. I have actually heard that from a lot of people. And more people say to pause and take a breath before you make the decisions, because, especially with breast cancer, in very few instances is it a life-threatening emergency that you have to act now. Most instances you have time to really sit with all the information before you make a decision. But I love the fact that you point out, okay, after you've made that decision, before everything starts, you can take that time to just breathe and calm down and know that, the decisions that you made are going to be the best for you before you get into all that treatment, because our stress levels make a difference. And okay, I made this decision, but now is it the right decision? And I got to do this and I got to do this. And you don't ever have the chance to just go, okay, it's all going to be good.
And
So
we
I love
also
that.
get a lot of inputs. We get a lot of inputs from other people once we're sharing our decision. And so I find that if we're centered on why we made that decision, we're better able to manage all the external feedback. Maybe we have a core group of people that we talk to, but then when we share more widely, it's more of, here's what I'm doing, not, please give me your opinions on all of this.
Right. People are going to give their opinions anyway, but
They are. That is part of the experience.
yes. I think I waited until after my surgery before I even shared with the world, because I like to say I was getting so much solicited advice from my care team and all the things that I really didn't need any unsolicited advice from people who just see me on social media and don't really know me or, care to, other than to, impose themselves on my life.
Yeah, I get that now. It was interesting because I wasn't on social media before, so it was just me giving out the information. But now if I'm going through something or someone in my life is going through something, because I share so much, I don't share that stuff in real time at this point. I usually give myself a little bit of time before I'm ready to figure out how I want to share it.
Right. Because, you've got those keyboard warriors out there who feel the need to say whatever they're thinking without any filters, which
Exactly.
that's a story for another day.
It is. That's a different we could fill a whole other podcast with that.
Whole series of podcasts on that
I
one.
know, right? Things not to say to a cancer patient.
Right.
Okay. Never ending.
There's your next book. All right, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time today. This was such a delight, and I'm so grateful that we were able to connect and get to know each other better. And I know a lot of people are going to really get a lot out of your story and just the significance of DCIS as a cancer, and we all go through it. We all hear those 3 words, and it changes our lives, and it doesn't matter if it's stage 0 or stage 4 or whatever. So thank you very much for sharing your story with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, and thank you for what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Have a great rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.